Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these little guys. Well, actually, these huge guys right here. These are the Demko Knives AD-20. Two different models of it, the full titanium and a G10 version. First off, though, in the name of full disclosure, I want to thank the Demkos for sending these guys along. I reached out to them when the AD-20 hit, and I said, guys, I'd love to get one of these guys on the table. And they said, sure, absolutely. I paid full price for both of these knives because, frankly, yeah, why not, right? Support some makers, but nonetheless, they're hard to get, and that's how I ended up with this pair. These are straight from the Demkos. So we do have to assume these are the very best quality controlled AD-20s ever, and I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature of my review. Next thing, size comparison. Big will do. I'll go ahead and I'll use the Thai version for this. We'll start off with the Spyderco PM2. And what you can see here is that although actually in terms of the handle size, it's not all that different from the PM2. And in terms of sharpened blade length, it's only a little bit bigger. There you go. We'll pull out the Ontario Rat number 2 right here. And we can see it is dwarfed by the AD-20. We will put down the Spyderco Delica, which is also looking pretty minuscule next to that AD-20. And then finally, a couple of other size comparisons that I think are particularly relevant. The first one is another big ridiculous knife. That would be the CRKT Shock. Just as proof that there are definitely bigger knives out there. And then actually maybe a more reasonable size comparison in its own special and reasonable way would be the Cold Steel AD-15, which is of course a production version and a pretty faithful production version of the AD-15 knife from the Demkos. I actually have had an AD-15 on the channel, both the Cold Steel as well as a custom. Well, I'm sorry, it was their machine ground, but it was directly from the Demkos, and I love that knife a great deal. I now own the Cold Steel because, frankly, it's just budget-wise, it makes a little bit more sense. But nonetheless, this is the AD-15, and what we see here is that in terms of blade length, the AD-15 is slightly longer, but in terms of overall handle size, the AD-20 is a little bit bigger. So there you go. Next thing, there are different varieties of the AD-20 at this point. Although there is no Cold Steel version, hopefully yet, because that would be pretty cool. There are two varieties. There are the custom versions, which are going to be more expensive, and then there are these guys here, which are machine ground. I don't know exactly what the distinction is there. I know that on the custom ones, they're ground by hand, by the Demkos, but and these are ground by machine, but I don't know if there were other changes in there. All I can account for here are the MG models. And there were two different models on the table here, as you're probably noticing. One of those models is this full Thai version, which goes retail for $625, and then these guys are a G10 version, which are going for about $425 here. And then finally, you get two different options of steels. At least if you order it from the Demkos, you can do 20CV as well, CPM 20CV, as well as 3V. These are both in 20CV. But there you go. So let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of these very interesting, very big knives right here. So on the, to start with, on the good side, these are made in the States. Now, look, this is not an inherently good thing necessarily. I mean, there's quality all around the world, and quality is about effort, not geography. But still, for a lot of folks and a lot of my viewers, that's something that's important, and it's nice to see here. So there's that. Next thing, this is made with very, very nice blades. I mean, not only are we using good steels here, but they're done with very nice heat treat. They've got reasonably thin edges. This is a little hard to show off, but what we see here is this comes down to a reasonably thin edge, and although the tip definitely is thicker, there's not much distal taper on the blade. It doesn't taper down that much on this direction. It is a very thin, well, a reasonably thin edge, and given the knife, it actually cuts surprisingly well, given its size and everything like that, so that's good. Next thing, these are fully ambidextrous knives in every way but one. You just need a lefty clip. The clip that comes stock is right-hand specific, but I've heard from a viewer that they've made a left-hand clip for people, so you could probably contact the Demkos and get one of those, but the knife itself is fully ambidextrous in that you have thumb studs on both sides. You have an opening hole from both sides, and the lock itself, the shock lock on the top, which, by the way, I'll talk more about this in a bit, but you pull back to disengage the lock there. The shock lock itself is completely ambidextrous, and this is a knife that, if your finger works properly, there we go, is just as good for lefty and righty. So that's good. Next thing, on the titanium model here, this is their rough, their textured titanium. And this is textured. There is a texture here. But But the thing is, it's not a super abrasive texture. Unlike actually on the for whatever reason the G10 feels a little bit sharper than the titanium. This is a great texturing here. It's grippy, absolutely, but it's not problematically so. And especially with this finger choil here, this is not going anywhere in your hand. This is, as well as all the jimping on the top here, this is a great Vaseline factory knife. And speaking of the ergonomics, generally, it is very ergonomic. Both of these knives are great in the hand. And in fact, you can do a couple of different things. I tend to use them choked up a little bit like this, where I've got my finger here in this sort of finger choil. But you can also go a little further back, at which point the shock lock becomes a thumb ramp. And a lot of people have said, and in fact, I was wondering myself, like, God, having that thing hanging off the top of this is going to be a bad idea ergonomically. But no, if you're choked up, it's behind your thumb here. And by the way, it's not really a safety issue because you're not going to bring your thumb back in a very specific way to do that. And even if you did somehow manage to unlock it by pulling your thumb back, your other finger is still resting right here. And so this unsharpened portion would hit your finger first. But this is not, ergonomically speaking, it actually works well in both varieties. And you can also get a reverse grip on it if you feel like that's your life situation. But nonetheless, you've got a couple of different great options here, and none of them is the lock at all unsafe. So ergonomics are really well done. Next thing, the use of jimping here is great. You've got some nice little bit of texturing on the back of this guy right here. You've got some nice texturing on the front of this guy right here, and you've got some on the blade here, coupled with the rest of it. This really does, it's textured great, and it makes this lock super easy to use, which is excellent. And actually, that brings us to our next point, which is the action on this is great. When you pull this lock up and away, the blade is just sort of flopping around in here. There's not much going on there. And especially on the titanium one, which is a little bit better broken in, there is absolutely nothing. I mean, you can just pull the lock back and let the blade fall open if you'd like it to, or swing it out. It's hard to do this under a camera here, but nonetheless, the action on this is very, very good. It's very addictive, frankly. This is a knife that you find yourself just sitting there doing this kind of thing, or flipping it open there. It's absolutely great. It has an excellent action. It's very easy to deploy. I tend to give it a little bit of risk because I have smaller thumbs than most, but it works very, very well. And so the action on this is quite good. It's quite addictive, and it's very easy to use, both to deploy and to pull it back in together. And especially as it's worn in, oh yeah, so that's great. Then finally, these are both on brand for Demko Knives. Demko Knives and Demko's designs, generally speaking, he's done a lot of design work for Cold Steel as well, tend to be very big, very beefy, very beatery, just they're serious knives. And I don't necessarily mean serious in the sense of taking yourself too seriously, death on contact! No. They're not like that, but they're knives that are really built to be beaten on. They're built to be overbuilt. They're kind of, they've got their own aesthetic going on there. And so especially the full titanium here is kind of hilariously overbuilt with this really good lock, this very strong lock with the full titanium and everything. This is just really on brand. This feels deeply Demko to me. I appreciate that at some level. I think it works out very nicely. I'm a big fan of that. And so these are both very on brand for Demko. These feel like they should be Demko designs, and they carry some of the same DNA as, for instance, the AD-15 with a similar sort of finger choil, although a little bit more compelling. Ergonomically, the AD-20 is just better than the 15 in pretty much every way. So at least to me, all that is the good, is that these are on brand for Demko with a stellar action, great use of jimping, great ergonomics, good titanium texturing here. They're fully ambidextrous with nice blades, and they're made in the States. On the great side to me is the shock lock. Now, I'm going to go ahead and send you to my disassembly video for this to see exactly how these work. You will get a good demo of that in the first 5 minutes of the video, then you're welcome to come on back here. But the simple fact is the shock lock is a great design. I haven't hung weights off of it or anything like that. God knows, I'm sure Cold Steel is just, they cannot wait to do that at some point in time in a video if they end up making a version of this. But at the same time, it is very, very strong. There is no play in any direction here. It is very easy to use. Literally, you pull the lock back and the knife closes, right? It's fully ambidextrous. It's got this very addictive action. It's very secure. And frankly, the design itself is very graceful. You've got titanium pins here, or at least they might be steel, I'm not sure. And then you've got your lock bar here, and then there's a spring, and it's not like an Omega spring, it's just a good old-fashioned boring coil spring. And then the rest of it is just clever geometry, right? This is a really great design. I found myself taking apart this guy and thinking to myself, God, that's really smart. Like, why didn't I think of that? And then the answer is because I'm not Andrew Demko, right? But nonetheless, this is just a great lock design. And the fact that it exists up on the top here, but it's positioned such that it doesn't interfere in any way and that it's safe in every way, it's great. So the shock lock here is, I'm not sitting here saying this is the only lock anyone should ever use again or anything like that, but it is a really compelling new lock. There are lots of new locks out there in the world that, or new locks that don't really carry their weight. It's just like, okay, that's yeah, I haven't seen that before. Great. Now, this one's good. I like this a lot, and I do hope we see more shock locking out going on in the world. So, to me, at least, that's what's great, is the shock lock. Absolutely a great choice, super grateful, graceful, and well-designed. On the bad side, to start with, one thing that is going to catch some people off guard, and in fact, it caught me off guard a little bit, is that these are big, beefy, beatery knives, but they're actually both running on bearings. And so I don't think this is bad, but it is going to be a little unexpected. If you are in constantly gritty scenarios, that might not be necessarily ideal. It's easy enough to clean up and clean out that I don't think it's going to be a major problem, but that is one thing you're going to want to keep in mind about this. They're both running on bearings. Next thing, these are both using very thick blade stock here. And get a brief measurement of the blade stock, but the basic number is thick. Let's go ahead and read this out real quick. We are looking at 4.5 millimeters. No, I don't. Let's try that in freedom units. Yeah, looking like 0.18 inch stock. Something like that. That is serious business. This is a thick little blade. And as a result, although he's grounded down, they've grounded down, whoever made the damn things, grounded down well enough that it's not necessarily problematic. It is definitely a thick blade right there. And so that means that if you're trying to push this through, a non-pliant surface or something, this is going to not be ideal. There are definitely kinds of cutting where a thinner blade is going to be better. Next thing, these guys had some initial lock stick, particularly if you really whack them open in that way, if you deploy with the thumb stud and then there got to be a little stick, but that is actually loosened up over time, and I've not had that happen since maybe day 2. There are times where it's a little bit stickier, but at the same time, it works. There's no real problem with that anymore. And so that's good. Next thing, there is very little distal taper. That means that the tip of this knife is a little thicker than you might anticipate. So if you're a person who really requires for your cutting tasks a very thin blade tip, this is not going to be the case. But honestly, that's a little bit on brand as well, along with the thick stock and everything. So at some level, I'm penalizing Andrew Demko for being Andrew Demko here. I just got to point out that for some people, that might not be ideal. Next thing, on the bad side, and this is getting to be a little bit more objectively problematic, is that these are expensive. Again, $425 for the G10, $625 for the titanium. They are made in the States. They're well done. I see no cut corners here. It's not like there's any point of these where I'm like, well, yeah, but... No, these are great, but I'd like to see them cheaper, right? $425 is going to be prohibitive for a lot of people, and $625 even more so, but at the same time, like I said, I don't feel like I'm getting my face ripped off, but that's also because I'm accustomed to higher-end collector sort of pieces. So it's definitely going to be a good thing, and I do very much hope that down the road they're able to turn this into a production version that's going to be with anybody, but I mean, I sort of imagine Cold Steel is salivating looking at this knife like right now, but nonetheless, I hope that there's a production version that brings this design to a slightly more accessible price point. Next thing, availability isn't awesome. Although actually just like 20 minutes ago, apparently DLT, who is among many dealers that I recommend, dropped DLT Trading, that is, dropped a big order of these guys. They're probably going to be all sold out by the time this airs, but nonetheless, availability's been a little tricky, both because these are really excellent knives, and a lot of people are saying that, and because they're brand new. I hope that'll stabilize, and these will be easier to get at some point in time, but they're definitely a little bit tricky to get, and this video isn't going to help that one bit. Next thing, these are chunky boys. Oh my god, are these knives big and thick. Actually, so if we take a look at these guys, this guy, the G10 one, not counting the clip, is a little bit more than ½ an inch thick. The titanium version is actually a little thinner than the G10 one, coming in right at about ½ an inch. And so if you're looking for a thin and svelte knife, neither of these fits the bill, but actually the titanium is a little thinner and a little svelter than the G10. And so there's that. Next thing, these are both very heavy. So recall, if we do a blade measurement here, we are going to get something along the lines of 3.6 some odd inches on there. It's just over a legal line, which itself isn't ideal. But then if we take the weight, these guys are a little heavy. This is coming in here at 6.1 ounces for the G10 version, and then 7.6 ounces, ouch, for 3.6 some odd inches of blade. That's a lot. That's a very lot. This is heavy. If you're looking for a lightweight backpacking knife, the AD-20 is absolutely not that, and the titanium one even more so. So this is the heaviest knife. Maybe this is the heaviest knife. This is damn near the heaviest knife in my collection. We'll just go on ahead and put it that way. These are very heavy pieces. And then finally on the bad side, the only thing that I feel like is an actual error or a problem with this guy is on the G10 model. The G10 texturing is going to be good. It's going to be better in the Vaseline factory than the full tie, frankly, but it is very, very strongly textured underneath the clip. So as a result, this is going to eat your pocket going in and out of there. It's very easy to fix this, mind. You just use some sandpaper with a respirator, or do it underwater, and sand away a little the G10 there, smooth down that texturing, and you'll end up, like I did that actually to this cold steel version here. So you can see I wore that down a little bit. You can do the exact same thing on that right under the clip there, and you'll end up with something that's a lot more friendly to your pocket, while at the same time retaining the gription. But I would definitely like to see them smooth that out a little bit underneath the clip. However, if they're selling G10 or clips for either side, you'd only want to do that on the side you're doing it for, whatever. Anyways, but that is a little bit of an issue. This definitely eats pants for lunch, at least the G10 version. The Thai one is nicely done there. And so to me, all that's the bad here is that the G10 under the clip is a little rough. I'm sorry, well, it is. On the G10 model here, the full tie is very heavy, but both of them are chunky little boys here. The availability is a little bit tricky. They're pricey. There's very little distal taper. There was some initial lock stick with very thick stock, and they are actually on bearings, which might catch some people off guard. Ugly front, there's nothing ugly here, so let's go to the final conclusion, which is that these surprised me. I picked these guys up sort of on a lark. Like, okay, I'm a gear reviewer. I'm lucky enough to be able to pick up high-end pieces just for the heck of it, to share my love here, but these look crazy. I'm probably not going to like it. It's huge, it's big, it's beefy. It's not going to be for me, but let's support a maker and let's give it a try. LOL, okay. And I did the titanium and the G10 because I was curious about the differences and because I'm completely insane. And it turns out I fell in love because these are amazing knives. They've got good blades, they're lefty-friendly, they've got good use of texturing, great ergos, stellar action, a very on-brand sort of approach, and a lock that is very new, but also super well-designed and well done, without a whole lot of without a whole lot of complexity and things like that. Mind you, the stock is thick, they're pricey, they're a little tricky to get, they're chunky, they're heavy, and the G10 here does need a little sandpaper under that clip, but the end result of this is a knife that is not only good, but it is truly great. I have fallen head over heels for this knife. This is I think I said this like day one to the Demkos, like on Instagram. This is a gigantic, dumb knife, and I love it. And I mean dumb in the very best of ways, right? Like, this is a knife that is ridiculous. It's completely nuts. There is absolutely no reason that I ever need that. There is no part of my life, and hopefully there never will be a part of my life that requires anything quite this beefy and overbuilt, but oh my God, is it amazing. This is a really, really nice piece, and you have to understand exactly where it is. I mean, especially the full tie one, this is not meant to be your, super practical everyday carry tool, right? Instead, I think particularly the tie is an expression of everything that the Demko philosophy is, with a crazy lock. It's well made with surprisingly good blade and an action that takes a little moment to learn, but is super fidgety once you get done with it. As for which one you should do, honestly, I have fallen for the titanium. It is less practical in every single way. But as a collector, and as somebody who's really interested in the essence of Demko knives, this feels like a more unadulterated expression, right? It's just Demko kind of being Demko-ish. Right? And so I kind of love that very much. It's like, it's like the Cold Steel Espada XL. It's like, yeah, that's completely nuts, but you don't get any colder steel here. And so similarly, this feels like sort of the version to me. But that said, if you are looking at this knife and thinking, I really want a big, beatery, beefy knife to carry around with me every day, and you're interested in things like not having one side of your pants fall off because you're carrying a huge freaking knife in it, or you just want something, this is probably more practical, right? If you're just buying an everyday carry practical tool, maybe the G10 is a better choice. Not only are you going to save $200, which is a non-trivial thing, but it's just, like I said, the extra little bit of lightness, the balance is maybe a little bit more front, which is kind of nice. The titanium one, actually, the balance isn't bad, but it's a little further back. But nonetheless, maybe you want to go for G10 if you're after practicality, but at least for me, the titanium has won my heart decidedly. I like the G10, but it's going to get moving on. The titanium is staying around in my life. And this whole thing has made me realize something. Remember when I said I was surprised by this knife at the start of this? That's because I'm dumb. Because the thing is, I don't recognize the pattern. I keep getting surprised by Demko stuff. The AD-15, I got one of those on my table, and I bought it off my buddy immediately because it's weird, it's ridiculous, it's big, it's crazy, it's got this strange lock, but it's awesome. I keep getting surprised. The AD-10 from Cold Steel, the 4MAX Scout, the American Lawman. I just need to admit that I am a Demko fanboy at this point in time. Even though the aesthetic is not for me, it's there. Even if the life that he builds his knives for isn't the same life as mine, I can appreciate the hell out of the skill and design philosophy that's in there. And so it's really great. Demko has joined with this release, or more specifically with my shift in emotional state with this release. They've joined the just take my damn money list of people where if they announce the AD-21 tomorrow, okay, just send one. Because every time I handle the stuff, I'm impressed. And so I need to drop this whole, I don't know, it's pretty big, it's beefy, it's beatery, I don't know if I'm gonna like that, and just do it. So Demko's, just take my damn money. Whatever's next, let me know. We'll make it happen. Because I am really glad that I did this. This knife is now a part of my permanent collection. It is my very best big dumb knife, so to speak, and it is a shining gem. As a very, very strong contender for Knife of the Year 2020, certainly at the high end, but maybe for the whole damn thing. And if a more budget-friendly version of this guy happens with Cold Steel, and you know what? Next year is going to have a very strong contender too. So I am very, very pleased with this knife. I don't know why I'm very, very pleased with this knife, except that some part of it's resonating at some deep level, and the rest of the I don't know. Just well done, Demko. Keep up the good work, and don't ever stop doing that crazy thing that you do. So anyways, hope this has been interesting to you, that I haven't AD up too much of your time, that this didn't come across as an ad, because it's AD-20, no? Okay, anyways, hope this has been interesting, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now. Hey, 21 minutes! One over. Bye now.